And now, coming to you live from the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California, it's the Sheena Metal Experience with your host, Sheena Metal, only on KGRA Digital Broadcasting.
Hi, and welcome to the Sheena Metal Experience on KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Sheena Metal. I'm a psychic medium. I'm an energetic healer. I'm an interfaith minister. I'm a 29-year talk radio host in Los Angeles and beyond. I'm a creative and a performing artist, and I come to you live from my home in Southern California every Friday at 3 o'clock Pacific time. This show is about spirituality. It's about creativity. It's about humanity. It's about passion. It's about service. It's about becoming your best you and then being that thing in this big, beautiful world and inspiring others to do the same. And as always, it's about healing. And it may not be it may be my show, but it's always, without a doubt, your experience, my friends. My guest today is a wonderfully talented author and trauma and sex therapist in the spiritual and paranormal worlds. Of course, she may be known for her work on the wonderful TV show that I loved, Psychic Kids, Children of the Paranormal. She's been a guest on many of my shows, and it's an honor to have her back. Please welcome to the show. The wonderful Edy Nathan is here. How are you, my friend? It's good to see you.
Hi, Sheena. So good to see you.
It's wonderful to have you here. And so many, talking about work for the world, right? I mean, your entire life is really doing work for the world. It's bringing healing to others. And do you find that in doing so, you become healed yourself, right?
Sure. You can't help, right? From the energy of it, it surrounds you, right? And maybe healing is one thing that happens, but I think something else happens as well, which is an opportunity to find the positive, an opportunity to tap into what I call the yet. So the yet is about hope. The yet is about possibilities. I'm not there yet. I love that yet. And to be with people who are going through trauma, who are going through, trauma from all different, sides and experiences, it is helping them get to their yet and to be in their yet with them.
That's beautiful. I say that all the time because, I have spiritual clients and you have psychological clients, and it's the same thing, right? I mean, people are always saying, how come, right? How come he isn't calling? How come I don't feel better? How come I'm not losing weight? And probably at least every session I say, it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So I think that's so beautiful. And I always pass on. My mom used to say that, but she would say it in a different way. When you would think of the worst case scenario, she would always say, wait a minute, it hasn't happened yet. And as a kid, I learned to condition myself out of that thinking of the worst case scenario and not, because, as a kid, I had a lot of surgeries, and there's a tendency when you have a surgery 2 months down the line to do nothing but panic about it for 2 months. And she would always say, look, it hasn't happened yet. Today, you're not having a surgery. Today, we're going to see a movie and we're going to get an ice cream cone and we're going to laugh. Tomorrow, you're not having a surgery. So that I learned to not always live in this fear of what was coming. And I think that is so important, that we have hope for what will come, but we're not also living in fear of the worst case scenario.
That's
and
right.
I love that idea of the word yet. I think that's so beautiful. I've never heard it spoken of that way, and I love it.
Good. Yeah, I think the yet is really important, it just is, right? And your story is really important, because what your mom was really trying to help you do, I think, is to reset your brain, to rewire it. And our brains are one of our greatest allies in whether we're talking about spirituality, or we're talking about a spiritual emergency, or we're talking about trauma, which when you talk about trauma, you can't but help talk about that spiritual, emotional emergency that happens. the physical emergency that happens. And, the hope is to have a spiritual awakening, which is in the world of trauma, that you are not the incident or the event or experience that happened to you, but rather it is a part of you. It is not all of you.
Yes.
And your mom was really so wise to say, we're going to have you live one day, 1 minute,
Right.
1 moment at a time. And Michael J. Fox, he's amazing. He's an amazing person. Was a great actor. He was hilarious. Always could find laughter. The thing is that when asked, he was asked, and I'm not going to quote this exactly. So, Michael J. Fox, if you happen to be listening, I'm sorry if I misquote you. But
Sorry, Michael.
what I heard was someone said, "So how do you deal with what kind of what is going to happen or what you think might happen?" And he said, if I think about it and I worry about it now and it hasn't yet happened and it does happen, then I've worried about it twice.
Yeah.
And
right.
It makes perfect sense.
Right.
So-
Right. And you spend your entire life, and I see this with some of my clients, and I'm sure you do as well. They living from one trauma to the next, and one anxiety attack to the next, and one freak out to the next. And I'm a person who has struggled with anxiety my entire life, so I understand the urge to do that, right? But
Right.
then you just wind up in a loop of trauma that
That's
you
right.
never give yourself a break from.
That's right.
And worrying about all the things that haven't happened yet, that may not even happen, all the potential horrible scenarios. I think you did my radio show last month, and I think we talked a little bit about this, but I have clients who will call to ask about somebody new that they've met, and they're already, the next question is, well, when do you foresee we will break up? Wait a minute, it's not even a thing yet.
Right.
And already you want to know the end.
Right.
And you're not supposed, and I always say, spirit does not give expiration dates to me. I don't get dates about deaths. I don't get dates about relationships ending. I don't get divorce dates, because if you know when something's going to end, or somebody's life is going to end, or your life is going to end, you're going to live differently than you should. Right. And you will live catering to that expiration date.
Or fighting it.
Right. And that's not how we're supposed to live. We're supposed to live in the isness of the now. And that's one of the hardest things to do.
That's right.
But when you learn to live in the now, life is so different.
Yes.
Because otherwise you spend your whole life lamenting the past and fearing the future, and you're never enjoying what's happening right now.
No, you never are. You never are.
And it's hard.
It is. It's hard. And so the question becomes, how do you set yourself up so that you can be present in every moment? And it's not easy, especially if you've experienced trauma, or you've felt like you're an outlier, or you've been bullied, or you've been hurt deeply. Okay. Someone doesn't have to be traumatized to be hurt deeply.
Right.
And it can be a hurt of the heart. It can be a hurt of the gut. It can be a hurt that just filters through your brain and kind of makes you feel like your brains are like spaghetti.
Right.
Right. And so the idea here is how to just say, let me take a break from these incessant thoughts that are bringing me down. Let me smell a flower. Let me taste something. Let me move my body, because we know that those kinds of things actually break the relationship one has with the ongoing kind of obsessional thinking that just wants to take you down.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I had a friend who was very unmanageably bipolar, and he tried all these different medications and nothing worked. And finally he had a psychiatrist say to him, get a bike and ride 5 miles a day and see what it does. And literally that did more to control his bipolar illness than any medication he went on. Not that that would be the case for everybody, but in his instance, just getting in touch with the now, being on the bike,
Yes.
not doing anything, not having a specific place he was going, riding just to ride, and getting everything in his body oxygenated and moving, and being able to have that time to sort of think without distractions and blow things out of his brain that didn't need to be there was extremely healing.
Absolutely.
And find what heals you. Move, sit in nature, get in a pool, sit in the ocean, like whatever it is that grounds you in the now. Spend some time with your pet, like just being with your animal companion, because they're so good at being in the now that we have so much to learn from them about how to get there.
That's right.
And just enjoy and take stock in everything that's beautiful in your life right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes such a difference. I'm not saying it's going to make the trauma go away or it's going to fix you overnight, but the more you're pulled into the present, the less time you have to be lamenting the past and freaked out about the future.
It's so true.
There may be nothing to freak out about, right? The future may be great.
That's right. You just don't know. You just don't know. And not knowing can be so terrifying, but it depends on the script you decide to write.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I understand how scary it is to think you're never going to get something, and then when you get it, to think you're going to lose it. But it's, you can't spend your whole life so worried about that. You have to, at some point, you have to live. And it's to me, that's so much what spirit wants for us. We're here to learn lessons. That this is a teaching planet, right? And we're here to overcome obstacles, but we're also here to enjoy all the things that living in a biological place affords us.
And living in this biological body affords us.
Yes, right? Exactly. 100%. Yes. For all it aches and creaks. It's wonderful. You gotta love it for all its aches and creaks.
That's it.
I spend dinner oftentimes at my best friend's house, and she and her husband and I are all in our 50s, and we kind of laugh, like, because we get up, because we sit and watch TV, and then we get up and we're like, oh my God, we're in our 50s. But you know what? That's kind of fun, because I think of it like this: we all made it to our 50s. Hooray! We could have not made it here. So isn't it great that we made it long enough to get creaky? I think that's awesome. That's more wisdom from my mother. Why with you? Because obviously you could specialize in anything. You could take any kind of client. You could do many different things. Why for you is trauma one of your main things? Why is it that's so important for you to help folks that are trying to let go of trauma?
There's so many different ways I can answer that, because I can, for sure, I was touched personally by trauma, and it was complex in that, and there's 3 different kinds of trauma, and I think that it's important to just kind of like state what they are. Okay,
please.
There's a one-time experience. Okay, just a one-time experience of trauma. And then there's a chronic trauma, and then there's complex. So the one time is a one time. It doesn't mean it affected you at, any less than anything else. The chronic is that you keep on getting exposed to whatever that traumatic thing is, but it's usually like it's the same thing over and over and over again. It could be homelessness. It could be illness. It could be that you can't get out of a house with the same abuser. Then there's complex, which is layered traumatic experiences. So it's not just one that keeps repeating itself. It's one, and then it's another in a completely different realm, and then it's another in a completely different realm, and that's complex. So to understand that there are different levels of experience, and it doesn't mean that one is any better or worse than the other. They're all hard. And the way that one holds on to them and faces them or is taken down by them, it depends on so many different things. One is a support system, your sense of community. Do you have that? We know that community and mental health and spiritual health is abundantly important. Okay. So
Yeah.
having community, relying on community, fostering community, I cannot say it enough, which is why I think you've done that. You do that. You do that with each of your shows, and you've been doing that for so long, is that people feel when they come and they listen to you and they hear your interviews that you have fostered community for them. And what a gift. What a gift that is. The other piece is that I did not escape my early life unscathed from traumatic experiencing. And I would say that it was complex in that I was hurt sexually when I was 9 and I was bullied. So those are two really distinct, very different experiences. And I then put on a lot of weight because of the culmination of those two experiences. And that was my protection, my
Sure.
weight was. And that in and of itself was traumatizing because I got sick. And at 17, my blood pressure was like deadly, basically. And I was given a choice. You either need to lose weight or you're going to die. So that is a traumatizing experience, but not physically traumatizing. Somebody didn't hurt me. I was actually hurting me.
Mhm.
And so when we, think about the culmination of all of those different traumatic experiences, there's a breaking point. And that breaking point for me, because I wasn't really dealing with it. I looked like I was dealing with it. I was going to therapy, but I wasn't maturely. I was young. I wasn't really dealing with my stuff. And I ended up with terrible anxiety. And anxiety is a wonderful way of like, it's waiting for you, and it's a pool, and it's saying, come to me, and I'm going to make you so uncomfortable that you're not going to want to go out, or you're not going to want to socialize, or you're not going to want to get intimate with people. And that's what my anxiety did. So that then became the very like heavy duty stuff that I had to deal with. And that's why I got into the work of first grief, because my partner died when I was 27. And what I was then left with was, what am I going to do? And how am I going to deal with this? And people who wanted to help were just giving me the very wrong answers. And that's when I realized I need to start to talk about grief. But when you start to talk about grief, all of a sudden there's trauma. And if you start to talk about trauma, then all of a sudden there's sex stuff that starts to come in. And so it just became a conversation that came to me. And like, I'm sure, Sheena, conversations come to you and you
Sure.
can't then avoid them.
Yeah. 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 And it's interesting to me how many people who are healers, and I consider you to be a healer, my friend,
Thank you.
have had a history of various kinds of trauma and experiences and hurts. My mom used to say that, because she had a hell of a childhood, she used to say that, everything that happened to her made her stronger, but it also made her softer. And that if you were really going to heal people, you had to have many of those experiences yourself.
Stronger and softer. That's great.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah,
Everything
I
made her
love that.
stronger, but it also made her softer. And she looked at everything that happened to her that was traumatic as a way to be able to share with others how to heal from it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think that we all need to think of that, right? That our scars are what make us beautiful.
Yeah.
And we can't change what happened. So we have to find a way to use it to help other people also find their center from it,
That is so true. That is so true. And again, we have our lived experiences, but our lived experience don't have to fester. It's not about making them go away. It's about, how am I going to live with this peacefully? How am I going to take this in and say, okay, yeah, this is part of me, and I am who I am. I'm soft and I'm hard at the same time. I'm soft and I'm wounded at the same time. How am I going to live with this?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot of it is about connectivity, right? Because I
Right.
always hope when I work with people that what I'm doing is I'm helping them to find the way to sort of connect everything to their core so they can
Yeah.
be truly plugged in. I always use the example that it's like when you're stretching the vacuum cleaner cord too far and it starts to come out, so it's kind of half plugged in, so the vacuum works and then it doesn't, and then it works and then it doesn't. And I think that's how a lot of us connect. We're sort of have an intermittent connection.
Yeah.
And it's when you really get plugged into yourself and you really get your head and your heart and your soul and your brain and everything connected into your, what I call your gut, right? Your solar plexus
Yeah.
chakra. That's really when the healing becomes possible, I think,
Yes.
because you've had that kind of connection where you're really, everything now inside of you is working together for your best interest. But it's hard because trauma, all different kinds of trauma, right, and illness and hurt kind of pull us apart, and we have to find our way back into that connectivity.
Yes.
When we do, everything becomes so much easier. And still, even when we think we've dealt with all our traumas, right, things hit us down the line and we're like, wow, I think it's this is still in here, and then
Yes.
we have to work through something else. I mean,
That's right.
it's a I know a lot of times my clients ask, like, when is the healing going to be over? And I'm like, oh honey, no, 5 lifetimes from now maybe,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not in this life, because you're continually healing is part of the learning, and it's part of the spiritual ascension,
That's right.
is to be always becoming the best new version of you.
And we are. We're always learning about ourselves, right? And as we learn, we take in and we let go, and we take in and we let go. And that is a life process of taking in and then letting go. So the baby who is crawling, as they take in, I can walk, they then must let go of the crawl. And then
Yes.
they're walking, and then they begin to run, and they're like, oh, I'm not going to let go of the walk, but maybe I can walk differently, or I can walk with greater speed, or I can walk slower. And I've got choices about how I walk, how I enter a room. And so it's, what am I going to let go of? What am I not going to let go of? What am I going to hold on to and perhaps shift and change and remold? And it is, I'm a potter, and
Oh,
for
I
the
love
first,
that.
yeah, and for the first year of ceramics, it was actually when I was at the height of my phobias, where like walking outside was even hard, and I was able to walk 3 blocks from my Brooklyn Flatbush Avenue apartment and to the pottery studio on President Street. And I'd walk to that pottery studio, and this teacher knew somehow that I needed tender, loving care, one, but that she could trust me. And she gave me the keys to the studio
Oh,
with not knowing me very well. But she
right.
just said, you come here anytime, day or night, and that's it. And I'm like, okay, this is really cool. So my relationship with clay is very much a spiritual one. It's one of healing. And but one of the things that she said, she gave me a dare as I was learning how to throw on the wheel, and that's what you call it. Just, I want everyone to know, like, you start out with this blob, and then you have this wheel, and it's moving the clay, and you're trying to center the clay, and then once you're trying to center the clay, you drop a hole, and you try not to get to the wheel head, because forget it, then you've got to start all over again. So you kind of have to know where you're going to land in the clay, and then you're literally you're picking up the walls with, I used my two forefingers, and there they go up, and then you're forming it. And she said, for the first year, I don't want you to keep anything. I want you to take your wire cutter, and I want you to cut the walls down the middle. And I want you to look at the walls. I want you to see how thick they are. Do they make sense? Are they thicker in some places than in others? Because you want it to gradually get thinner and thinner, and you don't want a clump at the bottom, because your piece is going to explode. And I'm like, oh my God. And like, it was very hard because as I got better, I didn't want to cut the piece. I just wanted to keep the piece. But it was a commitment that I made. And it was a good one because as I cut, I was also cutting into me. Not literally cutting, but I was looking at my own walls. And the better I could center the clay, the more centered I was. The more I could look at the clay and the inside of the walls, it made me do a deeper dive into, oh, that wall is so much more like making sense, and it's balanced, and it doesn't bulge, and it's not going to explode. And then finally, like I showed her one of my cut pieces and I said, "Is it time yet? Can I keep a piece?" And she said, "Absolutely." And it was like I had graduated, but not only had I graduated as a potter, I had graduated as a person. And as I was working in that studio, my own sense of self, my own creative juices, my own flow, and my own balance, internal calibration also shifted.
That's beautiful. So if you don't mind me asking, if this is too personal, tell me you don't want to talk about it, but you're a recovering agoraphobic.
I am.
I am as well.
You are. New information.
I am, yes. And I remember once my ex-boyfriend telling
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. My ex-boyfriend telling me we played in a band together, and it was years later. We weren't even dating anymore, but he's still one of my best friends. And he said, "You don't know how scared I was every night that you weren't going to make it to that gig." Because I would send him first to be with the band, and I would pace around the bathroom and talk myself into leaving the house. And I would get there just as we were hitting the stage, because I never knew if I was going to make it somewhere.
Yeah.
And I remember in my late teens when I was like you, where it was hard for me even to leave the house. But it's so beautiful about the studio and her giving you the keys, because the only way I think that you fight agoraphobia back is you have to do it incrementally with positive experiences.
That's right. I agree.
Positive experience helps you leave the house. And sometimes you have a negative one and
That's
it sets
right.
you back a little
It
bit.
sets you
But
back.
when you do, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to start again and
That's right.
have the positive experiences and forgive yourself for the things you can't do and enjoy the things you can do until eventually you can do more and more.
That's right.
And
That's right.
it's an interesting thing. I don't know if this happened to you, probably not just to me, but I found it creeping back a little bit during COVID because suddenly I wasn't leaving the house for long periods of time. And then I was out of the house, but like things were closed and the bathrooms were closed, and you'd ride down the street and there'd be nothing open. And I started to feel it creeping back a little bit, and I had to refight it off during COVID. But it's a strange thing that I think unless you've been there, it's very hard for people to understand. Well, why can't you just leave your house? Like, why can't you get on an airplane?
No, because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But and nothing that is experienced around it is real. It's I mean, the experience, the anxiety, the pulse that goes to 180 and you're just sitting there and it's like,
yeah,
people can't believe that your pulse is 180.
Yes.
You know, that is real. But what the brain is telling you in terms of the danger that's out there is not based in such reality. It's not that like the New York City streets weren't dangerous. They were, but I couldn't walk down a flight of stairs to go to the street, you know, and I was 23, 24 years old at that point, and things were sketchy. Things were just so hard. I couldn't fly. My family was in Chicago. I couldn't get home. It was just one of the worst times in my life. And do I still fear or think about, oh, it's going to come back? It's going to come back, because now I fly and I drive and I still have my little niches, you know, I still have my little things that, you know what, I don't want to go into an elevator and go to the 100th floor. And, you know, I if somebody is there with me, maybe, but I still don't really want to go to the 100th floor.
No.
Okay. So sue me. but it's not going to impact my life to the
Yes.
degree that I can't live my life. And if I
Right.
really needed to do it, I'd figure out a way. But that's the thing, is that you learn, and I'm sure you did too, how to
Yeah.
be very creative around it.
You do, and you learn to take the wins, right? And my mama taught me something so interesting. I know my mom with the brilliance, but it happens every time you do a show with me. I can't help it. Um, she taught me this wonderful thing. There's always a door you can run through. And
Yeah.
I said to her once, because traffic is so bad here, and I would get terrified driving to Los Angeles from the beach where I grew up to go to auditions and things. I was an actor.
Mhm.
And I said, well, what happens if I get stuck in traffic and it isn't moving? And she said, honey, get up, get out of your car. This was in the 80s. Get out of your car, walk to a payphone, call me, I'll come pick you up. And the next day we'll find out where they impounded your car and we'll go and get it. So all the while I was in traffic, I would think, you know what, if I have to, I can get out of this car and go call my mom and she'll come and get me. I'm
That's
not
right.
trapped in this car. And
That's right.
that's how I learned to sit in traffic,
Yeah.
because I knew that there is an alternative. You can get up and you can get out of the car,
That's right.
and you just leave the car.
That's
So
right.
once I knew there was an answer, then I was okay.
Then you were okay, because it's that sense of being trapped. I can't get out.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's a couple of things that go on, right? I can't get out. I feel trapped. I can't breathe. I don't know how many times I believed I'm not going to be able to get a breath in, and I'm going to die. I'm just going to die. Or my heart
Yeah.
was pounding so fast. Sweat is pouring down my back.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting, because somewhere along the line, I don't know who said this to me, but I have now incorporated it, and it's not mine in any way. But they said to me, when you feel you can't breathe, hold your breath. I'm like, what? Hold my breath? What are you talking about? Hold my breath. I can't breathe. You don't understand. I am not breathing. I cannot breathe. No, 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 no. You just need to hold your breath. I'm like, okay, I can't breathe, but I'm going to hold my breath. And so I'd hold my breath. But you know what was happening in the moments that I was holding my breath? I was actually telling my brain, oh, well, if you can hold your breath, then obviously you're breathing. So it was just completely counterintuitive. And what it would do is recalibrate my breath. And there I was, breathing.
Right. Right. That's fantastic. Oh, I'm so glad that, and I hope you work with other people that have that same kind of problem with anxiety, because the worst thing about anxiety, I think, is that you just don't enjoy your life.
It's true.
I
You
remember
don't.
I got to the point where I could do things. I was probably in my late 20s, but I would go and I would wait for something just to be done so I could go home. And I was sitting in the middle of this beautiful old theater in Hollywood. I was working on the Howard Stern station, and they had given me tickets to the preview. My mom was with me. It was this great musical. And all I could think of was, I can't wait for it to be done so I could go home. And I thought, you know what? You can't live like this. You
No.
can't live like
That's right.
not enjoying anything in your life.
That's right.
Either you got to make a decision to start enjoying things, or you got to stop going to things, because this is ridiculous.
Right.
And that's when I started really being able to relax in things and enjoy them. And
so let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How often do you think when you did plan something, that you planned your escape?
oh, I think I planned my escape at that time every single time.
Yeah.
And then I learned that that wasn't going to be a possibility. And I remember right about that time, like a year before that, I had gotten the job on the Stern station and doing a late night show on one of the late night shows on that station. And it was, the biggest thing that ever happened to me in radio, but I had to drive downtown every night. And I remember the panic setting in and me thinking, look, this is the thing. Either this is your shot. Either you take this, or you've let your anxiety basically ruin your career. And so I did it. I made myself do it. And I found routes that I could take where there weren't traffic, so that I could leave early enough that I could get there early and I could relax before the show started.
Yeah.
So that I didn't have to be worried. And it's right. It's like beading a necklace. It's one bead at a time.
One bead at a time. That's right.
Until you get better. And there's still things. I don't like elevators. So when I plan travel, if I can plan it around elevators, I do. I don't like to fly. So if I can go and sit in the front row, then I see like just the open spot and the flight attendants. I don't have to look back at the hundreds of people on the plane.
Oh,
Then
that's
I'll be
good.
okay.
Right.
It's just one, and you take all your victories, right?
Every victory. Yeah.
And you just are so thankful. It used to be that I couldn't fly without anti-anxiety medication. Then I could fly. I could take one, but I didn't have to take one on the layover. Then I could take them to fly to the destination, but I didn't have to take them to fly back. And now I don't have to take them at all. So it was one thing at a time, right? And you
Right.
allow yourself to receive the help that you need.
Absolutely.
And
And you mention anxiety meds,
Sure.
and they are powerful.
Yes.
And for anyone out there who is experiencing anxiety, the one thing about having anxiety is it's terrifying to take anything because you want to be in control and you do not want to lose control. And I wish that I had initially taken some medication that had my doctor suggested I take, but I was so afraid that I was going to, I don't know, become addicted to the medication and or that it was going to hurt me, that it was years before I was willing to take something. And at that point, the synapses within my brain and those neural pathways had really formed around the anxiety and wrapped themselves around those synapses, those neural pathways. And it was like, oh no, like if I had only taken some meds and not been afraid and not felt like a failure if I took them, I probably wouldn't have suffered for as long as I suffered. It was, I just, be willing to explore the options, I guess is what
Absolutely.
I'm saying.
Absolutely. And
You're
I
not
was
a failure.
fortunate-
You're absolutely not a failure if you
No.
take something to help, because those medications are there to help your brain remember what it feels like to be back in normalcy.
Yes. My mom used to say, because she was also agoraphobic, but she never told me until I was. So it wasn't like I knew growing up.
Yeah.
She said it just makes you feel like the vice grip around your heart has been relaxed.
That's it.
And it just and I've never taken them full time. It's always been a take as needed thing for me. And sometimes, like all people that are too hard on themselves, I beat myself up and say, well, and I think, you know what? No, this is what it's for.
That's
They're
right.
for when you feel like this.
That's right.
And it's okay.
That's right.
I think people with anxiety, who are oftentimes empaths, right? We're very hard on ourselves.
Very sensitive. That's
And
right. And if you weren't an empath before the anxiety, you may very well become one because of it, because you start to read people and read situations, and there's nothing like base fear to actually start to enable you to see things and feel things and smell things that you may not have smelled or heard or felt before.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's kind of its own little acid trip. But
it is. It's its own little acid trip. That's for sure.
I said to my friends the other day, I don't know how people fly that don't have anti-anxiety medication, and they said they drink. And I'm like, oh, because I don't drink, so I don't think about that. But I think that's why people drink so much on planes.
Yeah. And that's why they tell you you're not allowed to bring your own alcohol, because people would just be drinking away
the whole time, and the airline would be making no money off that. No, I think that's absolutely true. What a wonderful thing for us to bond on today, because I did not know that about you. I just assumed you always had everything together, because you just seem like you always have everything together. But I think oftentimes those are people that have anxiety, right? We learn how to present
and
like
mask.
Nothing to see here.
That's right. And you know how to mask and
nothing to see here.
That's right.
And oftentimes I think folks with anxiety are very strong people that just have a little bit of a weakness, right? That maybe it's so we don't rule the world, but there is a strength in many areas, but then we have that. And it's
I think you're right. And now to bridge into the clinical just for a moment.
Please.
Okay. I also think that a lot of times unexpressed anger turns into anxiety.
Sure.
And when that anger does not get expressed, and it sits in the solar plexus, and it sits in one's own soul, and it just sits there, and it doesn't have an expression, that it turns into anxiety. And that when there is an expression of anger, especially during a panic attack, it's pretty amazing that 9 times out of 10, my clients, and I've observed this, just in life, that there is a dissipation of the anxiety, and actually there's a sense of calm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's stuff that's in you that isn't getting out of you, right?
That's
so
right.
It manifests in a different way.
That's right.
Like everything, right? I mean, if you don't work through things and get it out, it finds a way to manifest itself.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think as tough, Americans and descendants of Puritans in this country, the ethic is like, just stuff it down and keep
stuff
going.
it down,
Stuff
hide
it
it,
down and
don't
keep
talk
going.
about it, grind
Right.
your teeth,
Right.
drink,
Drink.
take
Right.
your drugs,
Yes.
whatever,
Right.
and
Exactly.
that
Smoke
anger
a lot
just
of pot.
yeah.
Yeah. And what happens is it doesn't go away. It's just like it's like band-aiding a septic, abscess.
Right.
The outside skin is healed, but underneath, this infection is brewing.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that even if it's not those things, it can be energetically, sometimes you are drawing the trauma back to yourself because you haven't healed from it. It's almost like you become a beacon for it, and you wind up drawing people to you that are the same over and over again because you haven't healed that deep wound inside
Right.
of you.
And I think that we have a mistaken idea of what healing is. And I think that part of the mistake is that we think to heal means, okay, it's all clean, it's done.
Exactly.
We're done with this, and we've taken our hand sanitizer, we've sanitized ourselves, and never again. It's not going to filter through our brains, our bodies, and we have just cleaned this up. Well, that to me is not healing. Healing, if I can define it in terms of my own framework, is that you've learned to live with it peacefully, and that it's not a life interrupter, and it doesn't take your breath away. Rather, you notice it, it comes in, you smell it, you might taste it, you see it, but you say, there it is. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to move my hands back and forth. I'm going to tap my arms. I'm going to move my shoulders, because I'm going to remember who I am. And that traumatic experience and the symbols of it, whether it's something that you smell, taste, or see, or feel kinesthetically, doesn't have to take me away from me the way it used to. And to me,
yes,
that's healing.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. When you started writing, because you have such a broad scope of things to talk about, things that you're knowledgeable about, and also places where you have healed people. Yeah. How did you decide what to write about? Because I would think every time you sit down to write, you must think, oh my God, here's 100 things I could write about. And well,
that's why my first book is so long, and I wish that I had taken it apart and just said, you know what, I just need this part, and then this part, and then this part, and it could be 3 books. But no, Edy needed to have that entire book, which is 300 pages long, on grief, and each of those little sections is important. But I think the grief piece was an important piece, and it was kind of my everything that I learned about grief and how to integrate it. And I broke away from the 5 stages and the 6 stages of grief, and really talked about what I consider to be the 11 phases, and that we move in and out, and they're nonlinear, and we want grief and the healing around grief. and the dance with grief to just be a straightforward, you just got to do this and this and this and all better. And it just doesn't work that way.
No more grief. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See ya. And you want to say that. The thing is that when you lose someone and they're part of your heart and they're part of your history.
Right.
I don't want to forget. I don't want to forget Paul. I don't want to forget my mom.
Right.
Sometimes I do want to forget my dad, but I don't want to forget my dad, And
you and me both.
Yeah. But if I say done, then how did I get here? I mean, we could talk about the spiritual way I got here, but I can't, I don't want to forget. I want to be able to say, yes, they have a place in my heart always, and I will always talk about them. I will always remember. I will walk around with peace, with placeholders. Yeah. And an example of that placeholder is I have a gold ring. And this, I don't know that you're going to be able to see this gold ring, but this gold ring was my father's wedding ring. He quickly grew out of it, but inside my mother's name is inscribed. And so I wear this ring, especially when I'm about to do something like this, because I feel like I have both of them with me. Now they've been gone, my mom's been gone way too long, and my dad's been gone about 5 years, and Paul's been gone for like 30 years. And I just, I just got to say that I need to remember them, and I need to have placeholders for them. And so the book about grief was a book about having a conversation, not only with yourself in this, and it's about the loss of loved ones, but it's also about the loss of the self and the losses that we have in our lives. And so it's not just, oh, I lost Paul, or I lost my mom, or my dad, or my dog. It's about, I lost that job, and that's a little G, but it could be a big G. Or I lost my ability to taste and smell during the pandemic, and my sense of smell is one of my abilities. It's one of my superpowers. Like, I smell people and I feel like I know them. When I don't have that, it's like I'm existing in a bubble. And the grief that I felt, I wasn't too sick, but losing that was huge. Yeah. So, we must understand that grief is everywhere, and it fractures us, and unless we decide we're going to dance with it.
Yeah. I wear my mother's engagement ring.
Okay, there it is.
She hated the marriage, but she loved the ring. And she wore it on her hand for 52 years, so it's got so much of her energy. And I used to, at paranormal conventions, let people hold it just so they could feel a little bit of how magic she was. It's I think that for me, the best way to deal with grief is you have to celebrate that person.
Yes.
And not in a, oh, but they're dead kind of an, I'm celebrating them, but I'm secretly pissed. But really celebrate them and be happy for them for where they are. You can be a little sad for yourself that they're not here.
Right.
But you still have to have a wonderful relationship with where they are.
Absolutely.
And really celebrate that and really mean it.
Yes.
In the same way that when a marriage or a relationship doesn't work out and that person meets somebody else, you have to legitimately be happy for them, right? I mean, you have to wish them love and life.
You can try. You
a lot of people. You got to do your best. You got to try to get to that place where you really understand this was not meant for me here. Right. And everything that happens for me happens for my better good. And even if they were terrible for me, I hope that they're better with the next one.
Right.
It's a hard place to come to.
It is. It's a very hard place to come from. And yet when something leaves, okay, so we were talking earlier about the baby that crawls and then must like kind of give
Yes.
up the crawling so that they can walk. It is the same thing. It is like it's not a giving up, because it's not like you forget that you ever crawled, but it is a dimension of growth and finding your resilience
Yes.
and stepping into the resilience. And I just came from a conference called the Masters Series, and it was actually at Oxford University in England. And
Beautiful.
it was really spectacular to be to have all of these trauma therapists talking about trauma and talking about so many different topics that we need to be discussing. And the thing is that there were some issues that came up, but how they discussed some of those issues was brilliant. And they came up with this idea of when there are ruptures, we have an opportunity for repair. And when there is a death, there is a rupture. The repair is not a goodbye, it's gone, but a repair is, how am I going to live in this and with this? And what might I learn about myself because of this rupture? And how might I step into my power and learn about my superpowers and transform into a metamorphosis because of that loss?
Beautiful. Beautiful. And on that, my friend, we are completely out of time. We could do this like for hours.
Oh, for hours.
I think you're so wonderful. And I thank you so much for
and you too.
Where can people find you online, my friend?
So edynathan.com is my website, but I also have a new website called sexualgrief.com. It's only about 2 pages long right now, but it's my new topic. It's my new book, not yet out. So if you want to learn more about that, just go there. And you can also get my book on Amazon, and it's called It's Grief, The Dance of Self-Discovery Through Trauma and Loss. And every social media. So look for me, Edy Nathan, and Edy is Edy, and Nathan is, I don't know if you have hot dogs there, but Nathan. So
I think everybody has hot dogs there. Next time you come, let's just talk about your work as a sex therapist. I would love that.
I would love that opportunity.
We will make a plan and we will do that.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Everybody, it's a pleasure.
Wonderful and fantastic and spiritually beautiful, Edy Nathan. So great to have you here. And thank you for the work that you're doing. If you missed any of those links, you can find me at sheenametalspiritual.com. That's sheenametalspiritual.com, and everywhere on social media at Sheena Metal. And if you need help, if you need someone to tell you you belong here and you're loved, I'm going to give you my cell phone number. It's 818-437-0886. Text me and tell me that you're sad or you're worried or you feel hopeless, and let me tell you how much you're loved and how much you're loved by spirit. Until I see you next time, seek peace, live in love, lead with kindness, embrace the idea of unity, always work to raise not only your personal vibration, but the vibration of those around you and of the everything. And most importantly, remember that you are love and you are loved, and you're absolutely loved by me. I'm Sheena Metal, and this is the Sheena Metal Experience on KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. Thanks to the network. Thanks to my wonderful engineer and producer, Emery. And thank you to my beautiful guest, Edy Nathan. And we'll see you next Friday at 3:00 Pacific time, only on KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. Have a beautiful week and stay beautiful.